UBC's chapter of Saikai acknowledges that it operates on UBC's infrastructure, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Please appreciate the meaning behind the statement as we move forward with the Labyrinth podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Labyrinth podcast. Thousands of students, less than 100 labs. How do you find your way around the maze of research opportunities? We are UBC Psychi, and this podcast serves as a one-way route to everything you need to hear about UBC Psychology Labs. We invite principal investigators and lab members to encourage, educate, and inform students about research opportunities in psychology. Hello, everyone. My name is Adya Mittal, and I'm an executive coordinator at Psychi. Today on the Labyrinth podcast, we are excited to have principal investigator from the Center for Cognitive Development, Dr. Darko Odic. We also have Natalie, Danny, and Eloise with us today, who also work at the lab. So a little bit about the lab before we begin. The lab investigates how children learn about the world around them. They particularly focus on language and thought in early to late childhood. A fun fact, the Center for Cognitive Development is also part of the UBC Early Development Research Group, a group of 6 research centers interested in cognitive and social development from birth to adulthood. Hello, Dr. Odic. Can you please explain, in your words for the students or anyone who's listening, what is the Center for Cognitive Development?
Hey, thanks. And thanks so much for having all of us on. So the Center for Cognitive Development is a research lab at University of British Columbia in the Department of Psychology. We actually do work not just with kids developmentally, but also with adults. We have 2 separate wings of the lab, but both of those parts of the lab mutually are interested in figuring out where and how many human-specific parts of our psychology come from. So in many different ways, when you actually examine the psychology of all of us, it's shockingly similar to that of other animals. But there's also a couple of ways in which human cognition is very unique. And we especially focus on the domains of language, higher cognitive thinking like mathematics, and meta-cognition, thinking about your own mind. And what we try to figure out in my lab is what are the kinds of building blocks that allow humans to think and use language, math, and metacognition, and how do they emerge over development?
Wow, that sounds really interesting. What motivated you to get into this area of study? Like, how did your lab come about?
So I think that for me, the reason why I tend to gravitate towards this topic is because it's at a really nice intersection between the kind of very well-grounded theoretical work that we have about how various cognitive systems and perceptual system work in both humans and non-humans. You know, it's an opportunity to do a lot of interdisciplinary work, bring in a lot of knowledge that we have from places like cognitive psychology, from neuroscience, from perceptual psychology, and even from computer science and computer vision models, and try to figure out how all of those things that we know quite a lot about interact with some of these domains of psychology, again, like language and math and metacognition, that we know a lot less about. And so it's a very exciting opportunity to bring together a lot of different aspects of psychology, a lot of different theories and methods. And that's something that I think gets all of us pretty excited.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I'm really glad I'm talking to you about this because it sounds fascinating. Can you elaborate what research methods you've employed in the past to test these phenomena and how they relate to what you're trying to achieve at the lab?
Absolutely. And actually, because everybody else from the lab is here as well, I want to make sure that, that we all get to participate so that the listeners can hear more than just my voice. One of the things that we really care about a lot in the lab is making sure that every member of the lab feels a sense of ownership and participation in everything that we do. And that's part of the reason why it's not just me today. So Denny, I don't know, do you want to handle this particular question about research methods?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm actually a graduate student. I've been in the lab now for like 4 years. So I've actually gotten to see kind of, the progression of the types of research methods that we use, given kind of that we've had to even switch some of our research methods during COVID. So like Darko was saying at the beginning, some of these questions that we look at are not exclusive to children. And a lot of our studies actually focus on exploring these kind of like three phenomenon across like language and metacognition, math across development. And so we not only do testing like in lab and also in daycares and under normal circumstances with children, but we also employ, the use of like some of like the sonar, like HSP systems to explore these questions in adults. Most of the methods that we use are kind of in the form of like computer games, but we also use really neat kind of methods like eye tracking that focus on, rapid like visual attention, and then also like pupillometry to kind of explore some of these questions like in more depth. And then recently we've also been kind of moving some of our studies online. So that's kind of given us a new platform to explore these questions, not just in person through like, behavioral measures, but also online as well, which kind of allows us to kind of access participants that are sometimes further away from us than just the UBC campus, which has been exciting.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I'm pretty sure like doing a lab online can be like have its perks, but also its challenges. Now I would like to sort of shift the focus to questions about student involvement in the lab, because I know a lot of people listening would want to get involved in the lab because the research you guys are doing is phenomenal. So this is just a question, anyone can take it. What is the structure of the lab? Do you have undergrad RAs? Do they interact directly with Dr. Odic? Or do you guys have any extracurricular activities? How does the lab run, basically?
Yeah, so as Darko mentioned, we try to aim for like a relatively horizontal structure in our lab. We really want a lab culture where, all voices are heard and valued. We think that whether you're an undergrad or a postdoc or a grad student, your perspective is important and really adds something different and new to the lab. So because of this, we really encourage our undergrad RAs to get to know everyone on every level, the other undergrads, the grad students, the PI. We also try to structure things like lab meetings so that, all lab members are equal contributors. Now, the exact like responsibilities that individual RAs get involved with tends to vary a lot from individual to individual. It depends a lot on, their interests and their specific role in the lab. And I know that Denny is planning on going into a bit more detail about this later on, so I'll hold off on telling you some more about this. But generally, yeah, undergrad RAs have plenty of opportunities to interact with people in the lab on all different levels with Darko, with the grad students, and with each other. And we try to strive for like a hierarchy-free environment as much as possible.
Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure that's a very fun environment to work in. Speaking of, Denny, so basically, what's the scope for involvement for undergraduate research assistants? Like, do they get to bring their own research if they're interested in a topic? Do they get to like research that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've really tried to kind of foster in our lab is to not have minions. So we really want RAs to actually be able to maximize it, like their experience in our lab, and get as much involved in research as they want to. So typically the way it works is that we do our very best to pair our RAs with a particular graduate student or sometimes a postdoc or even Darko based on their research interests. And that can entail them working on a project that is already like ongoing. It can also involve them actually getting started with the project from the ground up, depending on like where kind of their interests really lie and what sort of skill sets they really want to cultivate. Or it can also involve them getting started on their own projects as well. We've had several directed study students and honor students who have come into the lab with like really phenomenal research ideas who've been able to take that and work on independent projects as well. And so kind of going back to what Eloise was saying, we try our very best to use this as an opportunity to create a dialogue across. That way students can kind of get the most out of their experience, be it, getting their feet wet first with just doing some testing, or later on actually doing like their own research projects as well. And we've also been doing our best to kind of move away from a requirement that like if they want to do directed studies, it has to be an independent project, because we understand that, you know, there's not a whole lot of opportunities to actually get credit for some of the really great work that RAs are doing. And so we've also been kind of like shifting that approach too, to make it more of an optional thing if people want to do a full-on independent project, or if they're happy to just kind of explore some of these questions with us as we do like our own research.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Thank you so much for your insight. I'm pretty sure everyone out there is going to find it very helpful. So another thing, so what is like a common question you ask during interviews? Like, can we do a mock practice question and like ask for feedback? Just because I think that will be really helpful for students out there who are very nervous about interviewing.
Yeah, of course. So one of the questions that we really love to ask is, why us? So why are you interested in joining our research lab? And what do you really hope to gain out of this experience? And, you know, on one hand, this seems like a very obvious question that like, yeah, like maybe you're just interested in psychology, but we find that sometimes it seems that students don't really maybe think about this question enough. And what we really want to see is that you've thought about why us, because there's so many great opportunities within the Department of Psychology. There's like, we're a part of 6 different developmental research centers that all look at children, but then there's also like other labs that look at like very similar processes, maybe just in adults. And so one of the things that we really love to be able to see is that people have done their homework when they apply to work with us, that they've thought about, okay, like, you know, what about our research is interesting? And we're not expecting everyone to care about all the things that we do, but we at least want to see that like you kind of know a little bit about what you're getting into. And so that's one of the things that we really actually love to ask people like when we're doing these interviews, because it shows that they've actually thought about like why they want to work at our research center specifically.
Yeah, I think obviously like doing your research is very important before an interview. Thank you so much for giving us that information. Now, just a general question for Natalie. What do you think are the types of attitudes or personality that fit best in the lab? Like, what's an like ideal candidate for you guys?
Yeah, I think we all bring our own personalities to the team, but we all have a good sense of humor and genuinely enjoy talking to one another, even in the world of Zoom meetings. That being said, I think Eloise and Denny and even Darko all touched on the idea that we sort of have a flat hierarchy. So everyone gets along well because we all consider one another equals. We really value inclusion, and no one's more important than anyone else. Everyone's got important thoughts, perspectives, and ideas, and the lab couldn't function without everyone on our team. I think another big thing, though, would be flexibility, particularly when working with kids or a daycare. Sometimes you just kind of have to go with it, and even if everything's going wrong, at the end of the day, as long as the kid had fun, that's all that matters. All in all, though, we really just genuinely care about one another and do our best to support another. So if you're the type of person who's open to helping others and receiving feedback from others, you'll fit in great.
That sounds lovely. I think we've heard like a lot of great things from you guys. I was just wondering, can you guys maybe describe your position and tell us a little bit about your day-to-day activities and roles? Like, what do you guys do in a day at the lab?
I'll start. My role is probably the most directly removed. So although I do stop by the lab from time to time and definitely have students who work with me directly on projects, in general, my role tends to be significantly more supervision and really, I don't spend any of my time testing or booking participants or anything like that. And so while students, I think in general, I keep my door open. All students, whether they work with me directly or not, can come by and chat with me about anything. And I know certainly what every single person in the lab is working on and try to interact with everybody through meetings. I'm certainly significantly more removed from the sort of day-to-day compared to everybody else in the lab. And I don't know, why don't we just go down in order? So Denny, do you want to go next, and then Eloise, and then Natalia?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so my role as a grad student, I think, is kind of like two parts. So one, I have like a responsibility, to get some of like, the projects done for myself. But I also see my role as more of like a mentorship role, especially like to the undergrads. And so like what my day-to-day looks like is kind of normally just trying to help support. So I'll typically have meetings with the students that are working on projects specifically to me. When we're in the lab, we tend to kind of all collaborate on and troubleshoot together. So things will inevitably pop up in the world. And so, that's kind of my job is to kind of be an additional resource is the way that I kind of think about it. And so in addition to doing that, I'm also on the ground, I guess you could say, doing testing. I don't necessarily do as much booking, but like, I'll be doing my best to kind of welcome like families and participants into the studies and stuff like that, in addition to actually like helping to formulate the projects collaboratively with, Darko and RAs and sometimes other graduate students, and just generally just trying to, be a welcome resource in case like anything kind of like pops up. But yeah, and then I'll pass it off to Eloise, because Eloise is also a graduate student as well.
Yeah, Denny is so right that you wear a lot of hats as a grad student. You sort of, the day-to-day responsibilities tend to change a lot. I think it's hard for me to really like generalize and say this is what a typical day in my life looks like. Because it really varies. From some days you're doing a lot of more design things, a lot more mentoring things with students. Some days you're doing a lot of like heavy TA work as a grad student. Some days you're doing lots of writing or reading. It really varies a lot. I find this exciting. I like that you get to wear a lot of hats. It makes it exciting to you never quite know what the future holds.
My day-to-day work varies as well, although definitely not as much as Denny, Eloise's, and Darko's. There's a lot of emails and finance aspects to manage in a lab manager role. But there's also meetings, recruitment and hiring, training RAs, and coordinating schedules. That being said, I think the biggest and most important part is really supporting RAs, making sure RAs feel welcome, confident in their position, ensuring that studies are going smoothly. I'm also there to provide support, feedback, answer any questions, and listen to any concerns. I'm basically here to be sort of the go-to person if something happens or if anything needs to be dealt with.
It sounds like you guys do lovely work. I'm sure you have very busy days, especially online. So now, if you don't mind, do you think we can get into the nitty-gritty details of actually applying and being a part of the lab? So who's the best person to reach out to if you're planning to apply to the lab?
So if you're interested in joining, you can contact us at ccd.joinus@ubc.ca, and I monitor the inbox regularly and reply to emails there as soon as I can.
And what is the standard procedure of applying to the lab?
Yeah, so the standard procedure is that we send out a call if we're looking for RAs, and that'll be on the UBC Psychology website. RAs who email us back expressing interest are asked if they're interested in a kid, adult, or daycare RA position, and then they're emailed the correct application form. The application form kind of gives us an idea of who you are and lets us know if we think you'd be a good fit. And if we do think you'd be a good fit, then we'll reach out for a short 30-minute interview where we learn more about you and your interests. Once we've made a decision, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. It's pretty common for us to get quite a bit of applicants. So in order to be as fair as possible, we do all of our hiring on a rolling basis. So I highly recommend that you contact us sooner rather than later to give yourself the best chance of getting the position.
Thank you so much for that. I'm pretty sure everyone finds that very helpful. I definitely do. Are there certain restrictions? I know you guys have mentioned that it's a pretty open lab, but still, is there like a year level GPA requirement or something along the lines of that students should keep in mind?
There's no GPA requirement. We used to look at GPA, but found it wasn't really a good predictor of the quality of people's work or how they fit in our lab. and other information gives us a much better idea. So we're moving away from GPA. There's also no year level restriction. We do ask in our application, but it just gives us a better idea of how long you'll be staying around for. And applicants also don't require any previous lab experience. About 50% of our time, the applicants we have are people who it's their first time at a lab.
That actually brings me to my next question. Do you hire students after they graduate?
Yes, students are welcome to apply even if they're no longer students of UBC.
Okay. And what's the best time to get in touch? Like, when are your hiring periods?
So the best time to get in touch would be the start and the end of the semesters. That being said, you can really send us an email at any time, and we'll happily get back to you and let you know if we have any positions available.
Okay, so the end is coming, so I'm pretty sure your hiring period will also be coming soon.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm so glad I got to talk to you. I think we learned a lot about your research and the field of cognitive development today.
Yep, thanks for having us, and we're glad to help and looking forward to any students who decide to apply to us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.